with Direct Action Combat Performance, and Sam.
A from Adaptive State Performance.
And we're going to address a couple of questions that have been presented through email or Instagram or Facebook. And yeah, we'll answer the questions and we'll have a conversation. And by all means, anything that this may trigger in terms of interest of yours, and you want to go further on any of these questions or anything at all, by all means, put the questions in the comments box below, and we'll address them as we go forward. All right, so let's get this started. What's the first question,
Perfect.
Sam? And who is
Okay,
it?
we've got a few. So the first one comes from Kazra in Victoria, and she asked, what was the hardest part of becoming a JTF2 Assaulter?
All right, so Kazra, this young man from BC, great dude. I've been chatting with him and helping him out, mentorship, for about 6 months or so, and he's making his way from BC to train with me here in Ottawa next month, actually, so in February. So Kazra asked me this question a while back, and he wants to know, what are the keys to successful completion of JTF2 selection? And we've since then talked a lot about the success becoming a JTF2 Assaulter. And we'll address this question, but I know this is probably going to lead to other questions for other people with similar like-minded interests. There is no direct formula for the success of JTF2 Assaulter, but there are a couple of commonalities that everybody who is successful, they tend to share. So everybody that is successful at the unit that I've had the great opportunity to work with, very similar in some ways and very, very, very polar opposite in a lot of ways, and I think that's a good thing. What is common with all of those guys who are successful, who become successful, and who are still active and doing the job, is they are self-motivators. They are very hardworking. They are willing to do a little bit more than the average is willing to do. One thing that I can really honestly say about the guys that I've had the opportunity to work with is there is a group of guys who literally were kind of on the side of the tracks that could have went down a criminal type of life, and then there's guys on the other side of the tracks that are very clean cut and just no problems, no issues. What I find really, really interesting is the guys that are on the hard left, we'll say, like you could tell they either had a criminal background, which garnered their resilience, which gave them life lessons that you can never take away from. And those are the guys that I found my connection with, and those are the guys that I would trust very, very quickly. Trust was built with those guys more than, or a little bit quicker than the guys that were, I go to church every week, like I never swear, and I do what is the right thing to do, and I follow the law, which is not wrong. I'm not shitting on that. What I'm saying is there is a definite line where you can tell there's guys that are at the unit right now and they're crushing it. They're doing great. They're good people. They're doing good things, but they came from a shady background, right? And then there are other guys that came from, like I just described, the picture perfect white picket fence, mom and dad at home, brother or sister, the family, that whole, I call it BS image of what a typical family should look like. There are those guys as well. Here's the thing. What is common between both of those demographics and both of those individuals, both guys, we'll say from A and from B, both guys, very hardworking, all about the team, willing to do extra, and very resilient. So I share that with you because no matter what your background is, no matter what shady activity you might have been up to when you're in your late teens or early 20s, it's not too late. You can get yourself squared away, get yourself on the right track, work hard, put in the effort, and earn your keep. The great thing about the JTF2 community is none of those guys are there by happen chance. They're not there by fluke. They've all earned their keep. So what has gotten them there? Hard work, determination, and really being a team player.
So in that instance, when you have those kind of two camps of guys that you had experience working with, do you feel like people from both kind of camps and yourself all shared kind of commonality of things that made becoming an assaulter difficult? Or was this group of people, did they find this a little bit harder? Did this group of people find this component a little bit harder? Or was it kind of universal difficulties along the
that's a great question. No, I think we all have our struggles, and anybody that says that they don't have a struggle, they're full of it. I think the struggles are a little bit different. And the reason I say that is, say for example, we'll say the guys that come from Group B. So, you know, they had a harder upbringing. Maybe they came from a broken home. Maybe they came from foster care. Maybe they dabble with some criminal activity, found themselves in jail. The reason that I say use those as experiences, because I know those guys, right? I know those guys, and they've shared their past experiences with me. They're awesome guys. They know what it's like to take care of business, and their motivations and their struggles may be very, very different than that gentleman who came from a very privileged platform. Very, very different. Now, not to say that the individual that came from a privileged platform didn't have his own struggles. You know, maybe the struggle for that individual was, you know, the relentless pursuit of trying to always please mom and dad. You know, maybe it was always trying to score those straight A's because the pressure was on them so much because somebody in their family or somebody in their community were you know, confident that that person was going to be the next NHL hockey star, right? So they put all this pressure on you. You're a great athlete. You're going to be a superstar one day. You're the best. You're this. You're this. A lot of pressure on that kid. A lot of pressure to perform. A lot of pressure to bring it. He gets tired of it. Realizes that, I'm using this as an example, of course. Realizes that hockey's no longer in the books for him. So he's looking for an outlet. He's motivated. He wants to be the best amongst the best. So oftentimes people will join the military. They already have an idea about what JTF2 is, but they're not sure yet. But that's their motivation. So although the struggles may be different because of the lifestyle that they grew up in, it doesn't negate the fact that, you know, both components do have struggles, and it's just a little bit different in terms of, you know, it's kind of like navigating, a plotted route into a map. How you get there can be, you know, various different routes to get there, but at the end of the day, the result or the destination will be the same.
Right. So do you think that it's almost a prerequisite to have been through difficulties or struggles or to have faced significant adversity in order to be somebody that you would consider, you know, qualified to apply for the position?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say once upon a time, in order for a soldier to become a JTF2 Assaulter, he would have to do a minimum of 3 years in the regular force. And that could be any trade, but I thought that was a good idea, and I thought it was a good thing, because what it does is a couple of things. You know, with the Canadian Forces, there are pros and cons with every trade, and there are pros and cons with the day-to-day grind, if you will, right? So some jobs, some trades are a little bit more demanding than others, given the current situation that that trade is required, right? Why I think it's important that if people have a goal in order to become the best that they possibly can be, if we put that mandate where you have to conduct 3 years as a minimum. Well, in those 3 years, that individual is going to mature, you know, just as a human being. They're going to mature a lot. They're going to grow in 3 years. They're going to learn to work with other people that are either like-minded or not, you know, how to socially interact, how to control emotions when certain things are, you know, maybe not going according to plan, or maybe don't line up with your foundational beliefs and values. Then that in itself is sometimes maybe a little blip in the road, but sometimes can be a bit of a mountain to climb over. So I think having individuals work through those problems that, maybe not even problems, but work through those frictions, it helps them earn their keep, right? So they've gone through a bit of a gauntlet in order to get to where they need to get to. Now, the caveat to that is, well, what a waste of time. If I know this is where I want to be, why do I got to do 3 years if this is where I want to be? That's a very valid question. I think there's a lot to learn about the military. There's a lot to learn about ourselves. And the only way to really connect with those things and those developments and those growths is through experience. So you can't read a book. You know, oh yeah, I read a book about what the first 3 years of Canadian Forces life was like. Yeah, I got it. All right, I'm going to JTF2. Man, it doesn't work that way. And I know some people want to hit the fast forward button. Some people want to overstep the process and they want to get to the destination. I truly believe there's more negative consequence to that approach as opposed to the one who's actually taken step by step, learned a little bit along those steps, maybe had a slip, maybe had a fall, maybe had a reset, and then had to build their way through those things.
Right. That ties in really nicely to another question that you had, which was from Aiden in Vancouver, and he was asking, what advice would you give aspiring soldiers who want to serve with JTF2? So you just kind of gave some advice, which was, you know, almost pay your dues in a sense, like get experience, go through some hardships, do the things that, you know, obviously aren't the fast forward button, like skipping right forward. So you think there should be some service that you do before, not only for the experience, but, you know, to develop the values, to make sure that this is exactly the route that you want to take, and to make sure you get there at the time that you're supposed to get there. But is there other advice outside of the things we just discussed that you think is
I do, yeah,
very important?
Yeah, good question from Aiden, young man from BC. Yeah, I do. I think not just for success in special forces, but success in life. I think one thing that we as a society fall victim to, generally speaking, this is not everybody, of course, is people want to stay inside the safe space, right? So they want to stay inside this boxed up, bubble wrap facility that is safe. I think the more that we put ourselves out there and the more chances that we take, the stronger we're going to become, the more components of offering we will have to provide. When we stay inside of our safe zone, it's very easy to go through life, relatively happy, but never making any mistakes, never rocking the boat, never, being on anybody's radar or agenda. But the reality is you're just existing. You're existing in this safe space where once we get, build a little bit of confidence and maybe courage to try something that we not sure how it's going to go. Now we're talking. Now you're edging on that, that component of discomfort where a lot of studies and, people that are a lot smarter than me have supported that. That's where true growth happens, is at the edge of discomfort. So to Aiden's question, and to anybody that's aspiring to do something that's, maybe when you look at it, it's just like, oh, wow, that's really ambitious. Well, that's good. That's a long hike. That's a big feat. Yep, that's good. There could be a lot of things that go sideways. Yes, this is all good. What I'm trying to share with people is this is a good thing. When we're a little bit apprehensive, a little bit nervous, this is a good thing. Embrace that rather than trying to run away from it or suppress it. Instead, lift it up and let it be the thing that helps you become a better version of yourself that probably you weren't, last week. So what I would say to him, and then to kind of bring this back would be, try things, do things that you maybe would not do based on, what your own personality is like. Get comfortable with public speaking. What does that have to do with anything? Well, it has to do with the fact that you're willing to put yourself out there and expose yourself. And if you maybe misspeak, or if maybe the information that you're speaking about, you don't have 100% confidence in what it is that you're delivering, well, guess what? You're going to learn from that, right? You're going to build from that. So put yourself out there is what I would say. Try things that maybe are sometimes outside of that safe zone. Like, ooh, I don't know about that. Go for it. Try it. If nothing catastrophic is going to happen and you're not going to seriously hurt yourself or somebody that you care for, then get after it. Try it.
I think that advice applies really well to, like you said, just kind of life in general. It doesn't have to be specifically in this realm.
No.
Like personally myself, when I decided that I wanted to try MMA for training, I really negotiated with myself mentally for a while before I actually sent you an email and was like, hey, like I'm interested in learning about this. And I haven't learned a new athletic endeavor in a long time. And I'm used to being the person that's a great athlete. So to reach out to you and be vulnerable and say, like, I want to learn this and start from absolute ground level, if not below ground level, is very scary and daunting. But as soon as you dive in, you start learning things quickly and you start to get a little bit more comfortable. But you're not comfortable for a long time.
Yes.
I'm still not very comfortable.
Yeah.
And I'm still learning so much, but I don't regret at all my decision to reach out to you and start learning, because I'm not just learning things related to MMA, I'm learning some really big life skills from that as well, that are carrying over to other things. And then for somebody in my position, for example, when I'm talking to an athlete or a client who's, thinking about making a change, whether it's something athletic related or job related or life related, if I never reached out to you and developed that skill of being vulnerable and trying something new, I wouldn't be able to help my clients or the people I know in my life think about getting vulnerable and doing something different. So I think that's what you're saying there. It's super important for life skills.
I think it is, and it's awesome that you share that. And Sam, I think the more people talk about that openly, when people see that, like, you know what, I was feeling the exact same thing, and they can use you as a reference. They can use you as a, you know, as inspiration. Like, oh man, she did it. Like, you know what? Yeah, I'm nervous, but I can do it too.
Yeah.
And it's interesting where I found a lot of the guys that I worked with, at the unit, awesome guys. I absolutely love the guys. I miss them. I think about them every day. But what's really interesting is what I noticed was these are high achievers. These are like go-getters, right? The 1% improvement every week. They're trying to get better, faster, stronger, whatever it might be. But they do not like to do things that expose their weaknesses.
Yes.
They will avoid it at all costs.
Vulnerability,
exposure.
Yes.
You know, like, man, I work with some of the best soldiers in the Canadian Armed Forces, but I also work with some of the best soldiers across the globe. I've been very, very fortunate with my career. You know, I work with guys from Australia, SAS. I work with guys from the UK, SAS. In the States, Delta, SEAL Team 6, all these guys that you hear about, and you know, there's books written about them, and there's movies written about them. I had the opportunity to work with these guys. And let me tell you something. All of these guys, every institution, every profession, there's a top third, there's a middle third, and there's a bottom third. Doesn't matter what your profession is. And the reality is you're going to get some good ones and you're going to get some duds. And that's the truth. What I'm trying to get, the point that I'm trying to get at is the guys who are really the high achievers, like the 1% above, those are the guys that are open to exposing themselves. Those are the guys that are okay with making mistakes. You know what? And we all make mistakes. And, you know, I'll be the first one to say, you know what? In 1 week, when I was at the unit, I smashed up 3 vehicles and I locked my keys, the unit keys to the unit vehicle that guys were depending on me for in the vehicle. That was all in 1 week. And I was a relatively new soldier. I was relatively new to the assault community. And I got the dub nickname, I'm glad it didn't last, but I got the dub nickname for about 6 months. And everyone in the squadron that I was working with, so the subunit of the unit, were calling me Crash. Hey, Crash. Where are we going next? Hey, Crash, where's the vehicle? Hey, Crash. Hey, anybody driving? Anybody but Crash. And I was like, oh my God, I felt like I was this big, right? And the reason that I made all those mistakes, well, there's a multitude of reasons where I'm having fun with this point, but I want to bring it back because there was a level of seriousness. Yes, I crashed up 3 vehicles and I locked a set of keys up in another vehicle. That all happened in 1 week. The guys that I'm working with are all strong-minded guys, right? And when you make a mistake, everybody sees it. Like, there's no way to hide it. And here's what I learned from it. So I felt like I was about that big. I was a rookie at the unit, you know, still just trying to earn my place. And what I realized, it wasn't until a long time afterwards, is, man, I made a lot of mistakes, but I was the guy that was first to jump in. So something needed to be done. I'm like, yeah, man, I'll do it. I don't know what the fuck I'm doing, but I'll figure it out. I'll do it. And, you know, luckily I had some great mentors and some great teammates who were like, hey, man, do you need a hand? Do you know what you're doing? Yeah, actually, I have no idea. You give me a hand? And they give me some advice. I go do it and either not apply it to, you know, what they suggested, or I would go on a bit of a breakaway and try to figure out, I think this is a better way to do it, and I would make mistakes. You learn from that. Like, I made mistakes and, you know, I felt like I was this big, embarrassed, of course, you know, a professional bruise to my ego, if you will. But because of those experiences, no one can ever take them away from me. And then now, if I was ever in that position, now I have that as a reference point to be like, hey man, I was once there. I have a pretty good idea what might be going through your head. And let's walk the dog on some possibilities of what could happen or what might be more optimal, right?
Yeah, you definitely learn way more from mistakes than you do from successes.
Yes.
Like, you remember mistakes and those moments where you made mistakes way more because you have so many emotions and feelings in that moment associated with it, and it might be like embarrassment or, you know, guilt or shame or just like pure, like, I can't believe I made such a huge mistake. Like, you remember that and you take so much more away from that than if you had never crashed any of those vehicles and you never locked those keys. I bet you never locked your keys in a vehicle again.
No, I don't remember the last time, actually, to be honest.
Like, you will go out of your way to make sure you don't do that again.
Yeah, you double check these things, and even like I do remember, I'm not going to share the details for, you know, operational reasons, but like we were doing some, you know, some high-speed vehicle maneuvers. We're doing some stuff with vehicles that, like, you know, like any skill, when you're learning a new skill, there's, and this is the philosophy that I know you and I share, and this is what I'm trying to share with people who are work with me. I firmly believe, crawl, walk, run. People think, okay, I've heard that saying before, but what do I mean? Here's what I mean. When you're learning a new skill, understand the skill first and understand the why we're learning the skill. That's really, really important. Once you understand it, you get your hands and feet underneath of you, and you know where the intricacies of each thing have to be applied. Then you have the baseline. You're good. You've got your baseline. And then we add speed. So that would be the crawl, all right? The walk. So crawl, walk, run. So the crawl, hands and feet, technical, tactical skills. And then when you're walking, that's the speed. So we learn the skill, now we're gonna put it at speed. And then the run component would be is when you're receiving active resistance. So when I'm teaching anything that's related to direct action, I really try hard to apply those principles. And those 3 principles, crawl, walk, run, people have heard that before, but when I elaborate, understand the skill first, then we'll do it with some speed, and then we will add resistance. In that, in my view, it's a fundamental pillar in the way that I share things now. Like anyone that works with me, that's what we'll go through. So at the beginning, it may feel novice, it may feel slow, it may feel arduous. That's important. At the beginning, go through that, and then add speed, and then add resistance. So where I'm going with that is, there are certain things that, you know, that story that I just shared with you, I made mistakes because I was trying to go too fast, or I didn't fully understand the technique or the maneuver that we were trying to practice. But one thing I pride myself on is like, and I do remember those instances where like, hey, we need somebody to do this. And I'd kind of look around like, fuck man, I'll do it, right? Like, you see people sit on their hands like,
For sure.
Well, we all gotta do it anyway. And you know what? If I do it and I crush it, great, it's gonna feel good. If I do it and I make a mistake, everybody else gets to learn from this guy, right? So everybody wins. So I really made a habit. And guys that worked with me before, they know I was that guy. I was always with my hand up, I'll do it, give me a chance, I'll do it. You know, was there things that I can totally shit the bed? Yes, of course. Were there things that I knocked out of the park? Yes. And those numbers, you know, kind of leveled out because I was always willing to say, hey man, I'll give it a go.
Yeah.
Let's try it.
That's a huge trait and characteristic that I think a lot of people don't have, especially in kind of this day and age where everybody's afraid to be exposed, like you said, and afraid to be vulnerable, and you can always like prepare before you have to be vulnerable, whereas people don't put themselves on the spot very often. And that's kind of, I'm assuming, a piece of advice that you're kind of suggesting is to put yourself on the spot and to be first and to take that step, especially if it makes you uncomfortable. Not just to look like the dude that's taking the first step, to get that status of being the guy who's always taking the first step, but to actually do it because you want to purposely make yourself uncomfortable.
100%.
So that's huge. I think that's a big piece.
And I do think too, like, no matter what phase of life we're in or what profession we're in, we all need to remain humble. We all can learn something from somebody else. And, you know, I'll use a jiu-jitsu analogy. So I'm a brown belt in jiu-jitsu. Every time I step on the mat, I still learn from white belts, blue belts, as much as I learn from black belts. The material might be a little bit different, but there are certain things that a white belt or blue belt that share with me, or they do things that I either never thought of in quite some time or never looked at ever. So by watching the way that they, you know, execute a technique, for example, I'm learning something. And sometimes we need a coach who's a little bit better, a little bit faster, a little bit more efficient, and we need to be humble enough to say, hey man, I need some help with this particular thing. And I think if we remain humble and always hungry to learn from anybody, be open-minded, be like, don't ever look at somebody and be like, oh, what's that person gonna teach me? What are they? You've already boxed yourself up. If your attitude is, I've been around 10 years longer than that person, what's he gonna teach me? You've already boxed yourself up. You've got a closed mindset. Have an open mindset where you're like, hey man, I'm willing to see what this person has to offer. And if there's one little nugget that you take away from it, then it was all worth it. And if nothing else, you don't learn anything particularly from the technical or tactical perspective, guess what you just took away from it? You took away an opportunity to share some time with somebody else who has a like-minded perspective, right? So you all benefit. You have an opportunity to perhaps maybe look at a different instructor method or a coaching style, right? So you're going to learn something from it if we stay open-minded.
If you're staying open-minded, that's huge. Yeah, that actually might tie into the other question that we wanted to go over today, which is from Connor in Montreal, and he was asking how you managed competing in professional MMA, but also operating as a JTF2 Assaulter.
Ooh, that's a good one. Yeah, it was, so I fought professionally for 10 years, and my first fight was in 2008, and I just turned 30 years old. So I was 30 years old, a little late to the game. So I fought professionally, but my career at the time at the unit was going really well. Afghanistan was up and running, so we were constantly doing rotations in Afghanistan, which was awesome, and that's what we wanted to do. But I also knew that if I didn't take action, right, hence direct action, if I didn't do something about the opportunity to fight professionally, the opportunity to develop as an MMA fighter, if I kept saying, well, I'll do it next year, I'll do it 6 months from now, I probably would have never done it. So the decision was on me, and I knew that there would be, like always, every decision there's a positive and a negative consequence. I knew that. So I said, you know what, I really want to fight because I want to see what I'm capable of, I want to see how far I can take it, but I also want to maintain the status of a JTF2 Assaulter, because that was my motivation. I wanted to work amongst the best, and doing rotations overseas was really the bread and butter of the motivation. Now, how did I do it? Well, at the time I wasn't married, I didn't have any kids, so there were less distractions, if you will, or additional
responsibilities.
Yes, additional responsibilities. Thank you. That's a better way to put it. There is less additional responsibility, so I would literally go to work. We would do what we would need to do if I was here in Ottawa and not deployed, for example. 8 to 4 kind of routine. Train with the unit, 8 to 4, leave for the day, and then I would hit the mat. So I would be at the MMA gym training, and I would train from normally about 6:30 until 9 o'clock. And I did that for almost, well, whenever I wasn't deployed, that's what I was doing. That was my routine. And I did that every week, every day. Most days it was 4 days a week. Sometimes it would be 5, maybe even a 6th day where I would train on the weekend. And I did that for quite some time. Now, I want to bring that back because I'm not sharing that because, oh, look at him. Wow, well done. That's not it at all. There's a message here that I want to share. I chose to do that, and I will never regret it. I love every moment of both of those careers. But when I talked about the positive and the negative consequence, the effect that it had on my body was really became amplified the last few years of my career at the unit. My body was broken down. Knee issues, shoulder issues. Physically, I was broken down because I was revving. I kept the engine revved at such a high tempo for so long that things eventually started to break down. So that was a negative effect. From a career perspective, what happened was I put my hand up and I asked my chain of command at the time if I could stay in the unit and somehow be value added, but really almost like a what do you call that when you go into like a hiatus? What do you call that? I was basically put on the shelf for a year. The sabbatical, that's it. It was kind of like a sabbatical where I was still at the unit, still providing, value added at some capacity, but just not operational. Which means it was originally the agreement was for a year, and then after that 1 year, things were going really well with the fighting, so I asked for an additional year. So now that was 2 years where I was in this sabbatical, where still at the unit, still providing, however, not operational. And because the tempo was at such a high pace, the detriment was the teams, because they needed another guy, another healthy guy to help them, keep the tempo up. And I wasn't there because, selfishly, I was focusing on MMA. And I knew there'd be effect. I didn't know how grave the effect would be until years later. And here's the reality. I got boxed up. I became the guy that was the MMA fighter. And he's the guy that just fights. And I know there's guys that are going to watch this and that are either still active or who I served with. Like, man, I never thought of you that way. I know, because you are of the percentage that don't fall in that category. But the chain of command, not all of them, a large portion of them are like, oh, he's the MMA guy. So I got boxed up and my career flatlined, right? And I knew that was a potential, and I had a good feeling that was going to happen. Because here's the funny thing about people in the Canadian Forces, and maybe this is just people in general. The more I study on human behavior, I'm believing that it's just humans in general. Sometimes people don't want to see you succeed. You know, they'll pat you on the back and they're like, man, good for you. But internally, it eats them up a little bit. They don't want to really see you succeed. And if you fail, they kind of like, oh, good, you know? Instead of being the wind at the sails, and they're like, man, get after it. Because I did have some strong chain of command that were, and I'm so grateful that I had them, you know, patting me on the back and be like, man, get after it. You know, there's a small window of opportunity, do it. And then I had the chain of command that were like, okay, Sergeant Turner or Master Corporal Turner or whatever, are you here to be an assaulter or are you here to be an MMA fighter? You need to make a decision. You know, and inside that eats you up, right? And I'm like, I can do both, motherfucker. Watch me. You know what I mean? I'll bring my A game when I come to work, and I'll bring my A game when I'm on the mat. But you got to give me a chance. You gotta watch me. You know, you don't just dictate from a distance, right? So like I get fired up because I knew the moment I made that decision, I was okay with it. I said, this is probably gonna backfire career-wise, but fuck it. You know what? You know that saying, we only live once? And I know you and I have shared this before, it's bullshit. You only die once. You live as full as you can possibly live today, because tomorrow it may not be here. And that is exactly the life that I tried to live from the beginning to the end, and I will continue to live that life until I'm no longer here. You only die once, so live your life to the fullest. Whatever you want to do, have the courage to get after it and go do it. Yeah, will you fail? You know, of course. Not everything is going to be handed to you. You're going to fail, you're going to trip, you're going to fall. It's what you do when that happens. That's the character that gets built. And you know what, like, I had a great career. Loved every moment of it. And the question, I know it's a bit of a tangent, long-winded answer. I'm going to come back, but how did I manage it? I managed it because I knew that I could. I managed it because I knew that I could do it. And I only had a finite amount of time. So I said, whatever sacrifices I have to make so I can keep my job, whatever sacrifices I have to make so I can fight to the highest level that I possibly can in the MMA world, then that's what I was willing to do.
Even though you think that was a tangent, I don't think it was a tangent at all, because all of that was just proof of the different things that supported your decision and supported you in doing both of those things simultaneously. Like, you had some people who didn't want you to do both, probably because they know they can't do both. So they want to make you not try to do both because it makes them feel better that they're just doing one thing.
Yeah.
Like you said, you think it's a people problem, right?
Yeah.
Like it's a human issue where people kind of want you to fail almost.
Yeah.
It's because it makes them feel better about themselves, because they know that they wouldn't even try what you're attempting to do. But you did do both.
Yep.
You know? And you had support from people and you didn't have support from people, but both of those people at the end of the day were still supporting you.
Yes.
Because these people fueled you to still achieve that goal just as much as those people did. Because these people are supporting you in a positive way, these people are just supporting you in a different way.
Yeah.
But it's still fuel on the fire.
You're absolutely right, and I think that has a lot to do with how we conceptualize it, and you know, perception versus reality. You know, the perception is, oh man, that person's not in my corner. They don't want to help me. They don't want to, they don't want to see me succeed. No, that's my perception. That may not even be close to reality. Did I have that conversation with the individual? Hey man, you happen to be my boss right now. You're my sergeant major. Do you support me? Right? Because a lot of that is on me. You know, there's accountability that needs to be had with that, right? So if my sergeant major, who doesn't think I should be doing what I'm doing, but either doesn't have the courage or doesn't want to have that hard conversation with me, I'm not going to put it all on him. He's got a job to do. He's looking out for lots of guys, not just this guy. So it's on me to be like, hey, Sergeant Major, I really want to do this, man, and these are my reasons why. Do you support me? And let's have that conversation. Because if he doesn't support me, okay, let's walk the dog on that. What options do we have? If he does support me, that's all I need to know, because that's the fuel that's going to drive it, right?
Yeah.
So
100%.
You're absolutely right. How we look at those motivators and whether we use it for fuel or whether we use it as a legitimate, push. There's a lot to be said about the people that we share our time with, and I think it's wise that as you get a little bit older, be selective. Be selective with who you share your time with. There are a lot of good people out there, but there's a lot of snakes in the grass.
Absolutely. I think you said a lot of really good things at the end there too of your answer about you only die once, so you have to take those risks, because you can live a very mundane, safe, comfortable life and you'll have people that are supporting you to live that comfortable, safe, easy life, but taking the risks is what's going to make you live a life that's worthwhile.
Yep.
And I think if you were a different person today that didn't make the decision to do both careers simultaneously, you'd be a completely different person and you'd probably regret not doing it.
I think so. I think, you know, there's a lot to be said about, and I live this kind of mantra, if you will. I would much rather do something and then after doing it, like, I wish I hadn't done that, than not do something and then later wish I had. So I'd much rather do and then wish I didn't than not do and wish I did.
Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And like, you know, for yourself, Sam, I'm sure you could probably relate and share a story in terms of taking a chance. And you know, there's things that have happened recently with you, and I'm willing to bet that some of the decisions that you made had to do with taking a deep breath of courage and saying, you know what, I'm gonna give this a go.
Yeah, absolutely. I went through like 4 major life changes in the span of like 4 months last year, and that was amidst the pandemic and all this other shit that's going on at the same time, and every single one of those just seemed to happen at the exact same time. And at any point I could have just given in to any one of those things and been like, well, I'm fucked. Like, I'm not happy at my job, I guess I'm just gonna stay, because it's scary to go out and do something different.
Yeah.
And you don't know if it's gonna work out. But I said that to myself for so many months that I'm not happy, I need to make a change. And the day that I finally was like, hey, I have to make the change, I'm gonna be regretting my next 5 years if I continue to do what I'm doing, or I take the risk and just put in the work and make it work. Because when you take a risk, yes, it's a risk, but you're still in control of what happens to yourself. There are a lot of external factors that work on you, but if you want something, you will make it happen. If you truly want to make a change, you will make it happen. It might not be easy, it might take a long time, there might be some bumps in the road. It's probably guaranteed that all of those things are going to be the case, but it's always going to work out.
Yeah.
The sun is still going to come up tomorrow. Life will go on. So either you're going to continue to be unhappy, or you're going to make the change and go through a rocky period, and you're going to come out the other side and things are going to be better. And so I made that change with my job. I decided to go ahead and have an ankle surgery that I knew was going to lay me up for a while. I started MMA training at the same time. I knew I was going to have to postpone that. There were so many different things that happened, but every single time, if I was the same person I was 10 years ago and had to make all those decisions, I would have made the opposite decision. Every single case. I would have stayed at that job. I would have stayed at these things that weren't making me happy. But I've learned over the last many years that you have to take those risks in order to get the rewards. You don't get rewards for continuing to do the same thing.
That's right.
So
do you recall either the conversation you had with somebody that you trust or care about, or the conversation that maybe you had with yourself? Do you recall what it was, that pivotal moment where you're like, I'm doing it?
Yeah, for sure. I think it was a combination of both. I'm a very internally, I speak to myself a lot. I'm very introspective about those things. So I know that I had multiple conversations with myself where they were progressively becoming a little bit more and more real and a little more intense, because it was coming closer and closer to making a game time decision. But every decision that I had to make that was difficult in that period of time boiled down to, is that the kind of person that I want to be? And is that the kind of life that I want to live? And both of those answers were no. So there's only one path, and that's to take a different approach to what was happening in my life. So I grew up in a very I had a difficult childhood, and my goal has always been to be better than I thought I could ever be. And if that means making more difficult decisions and going through more difficult paths to hopefully have a better outcome, then I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
Because that's the only way. Yeah. If I stay comfortable, then my life will never change, and then I'm not fulfilling what I said I was going to do when I was young, which is be the best version of myself possible and to do better, to be better. And I also know that I'm a role model for, I work with a lot of young athletes, and whether they're female or male, or, the age, the demographic, you and I both, in our role of what we do, we are huge role models for the people that we work with. And I know that I wouldn't be able to sleep at night knowing that I'm giving advice to somebody that I don't take myself.
Right.
So in those situations where I had to make difficult decisions, if I was looking from the outside in and somebody was telling me like, this is happening, what should I do? I'm not going to tell that person to do A, but I do B.
Right.
I have to do A as well, you know? Like,
gotta be it.
you have to be real with
Yep.
yourself, to be real with other people, and that was huge. So yes, I had that conversation with myself, but I had like you to speak to about lots of situations, and I have some close friends and mentors and other people that I can speak to, and at the end of the day, the people who I really respect and who I admire were on the same page as me,
Right.
which is what you've said earlier, you know, difficult times, like, make good people,
Yes.
and making those tough decisions is what takes you a step further.
Yeah.
You know, like,
It's
there's no
awesome.
shortage for hard work, and
There's absolutely no.
it's the same thing
That's
with
it.
those decisions.
Man, it's awesome to hear it because I feel like sometimes I come across as maybe preachy sometimes, but that's okay because I believe in it. I believe in it, and I agree with you. If I didn't believe in it, then I wouldn't do it, and I would never ask somebody to do something that I would never do myself, right? And it's interesting that you had a harder upbringing, you had a harder life, and you know it's the details don't need to be drawn out. But here's the parallel for people that are watching. I was very fortunate. I had two great parents that loved me, and they had three brothers. I had two older brothers, and they did everything they could to keep us out of trouble, keep us involved with sports. And you know, my dad didn't make a lot of money, but they were good. They were rich with love and rich with discipline, values. And one thing, being the baby of the family, the youngest, two older brothers, I had two older brothers to help teach me and help show me. So I watched those guys make mistakes, and I watched when mom and dad tore the ass off of them, what they did, and I tried real hard not to do that, or to be a little bit more creative to try to do something a little bit differently to get the same result, right? So I had two older brothers that were essentially my mentors, and I paid attention to it. Didn't really understand it until later on in life, but at the time, the reason I share that is because I came from a pretty good family, and I still found a way, and I don't know where this comes from. I mean, obviously I have good examples with my mom and dad, but I don't know where this comes from, but I found a way to always want to be a better version, I just want to do more, and that has never stopped. What have I done in the last week? Well, I'm not settling there. What can I do next week? I'm not going to settle there. What can I do next? So that 1%, Sam and I have talked about a lot, the 1% improvement, I believe in that. You know, I kind of look at the last week, and I don't go too far, man, because I got a short mind and I get hit in the head for a living. So 1 week back, I'll look back, all right, what did I do? And then what can I do a little bit differently next week? And that approach to life just helps with the growth mindset. You know, it just helps, like, you know, and I think you're bang on with I believe it. Being a good role model, we know there's a lot of studies out there that support a couple of things. As adult learners, typically what studies have indicated is we learn primarily through experiences that create fear, pain, or embarrassment, right? So fear, pain, and embarrassment, adult learners really like hone in with what it is that they've just learned. But to your point, as a role model, we are all being watched and judged and viewed by others. So knowing that, whether you're a mom, whether you're a dad, whether you're a sister, whether you're a boss, whether you're a subordinate, it doesn't really matter. Somebody's always watching you. So think of it from the perspective, you're in somebody's lenses, right? Or you're in somebody's crosshairs. They're watching everything that you do. Why not be a good role model for somebody else? Why not try to share a little bit of positive for somebody else? Because chances are they're watching a lot more than they're speaking about, or a lot more than they're judging about, right? They're watching. So they're gonna learn from your mannerisms, your behaviors. So why not, just do something and take a little bit of ownership on that and accountability and know that I'm doing this for me, yes, but I'm also doing it for other people because somebody else is paying attention.
Yeah, 100%. And that's why we're doing these videos as well. Because like we said in the last video that we did, we have great conversations about things like this, and it does feel like a waste or a shame for other people who are watching or tuning in that they don't get to hear that too. And I think a lot of people have good conversations that don't get shared, but because we're both in positions of being role models, we have almost a responsibility to try and impart some of the knowledge and the experiences and advice and whatever it might be that we have and even if it only helps one person who's tuning in, then it's worth it. And I think a lot of people that are tuning in probably feel very similarly to us about a lot of things. So it's not meant to be an echo chamber, but maybe to reinforce, like, yeah, you're not the only one that feels this way and thinks this way. And if you don't think or feel the same way, it can be a good kind of teaching moment if you're open-minded, like we said earlier, where, okay, well, I never really thought about it like that before, but maybe I'll try thinking about it this way. And then maybe that has kind of a snowball effect. And hopefully it imparts some change, even if it's just one person at a time.
Yeah. And you know, like, there's people we know that you're never going to please everybody, right? So there's people out there right now watching like, oh, I've heard it all before. Yeah, it doesn't apply to me. Okay, man, that's fine. This isn't channeled towards you. And if you've got it all figured out, then be honest with yourself. Look yourself in the mirror and be like, if you truly believe that there's no improvement to be had, well, you've already flatlined, right? So this doesn't really apply to you, I guess. But if it doesn't, and you're that person that's like, at least gives me a perspective to think about it, then that's a benefit, and everybody benefits. It's about sharing positive, man. It's not about, you know, casting judgment or like naysaying somebody. It's about, hey, here's a coping strategy, for example. Like, you know, we're talking about a few things here today, and as you're listening, and you may have, you know, your preconceived notions or the perspective of what you think is applied to you. You know, here's a coping strategy for me. I'm a human being, man. I have good days and I have bad days, just like everybody else. In the moment that little negative monkey bastard starts doing the two-step on my head and I'm starting to go down rabbit holes of negativity, I recognize it right away. And the sooner that you can get in touch with yourself and the sooner that you can become self-aware, the sooner you can get on top of it. So it happens to me too, man. And when the negative little monkey bastard is doing backflips on my head, on the inside, this is what I do. Physical grounding. I grab onto my forehead and with my thumb, just like I'm swiping sweat off my brow, I get rid of the little fucker because he's useless. So I recognize it and I say, you know what? You're not along for the ride, man. No free rides here. You're out. That works for me. That's a physical touch, a physical grounding. And I say to myself, get back on track, man, because somebody else is watching and somebody else is depending on you. That's what I do. And that's how I take accountability. And that's how I really own the responsibility to take action. So when the little negative monkey bastard is doing the two-step on my head, I'm like, yep, there he is. I haven't seen him in a while. But if I don't get a hold of him right away, he's going to start to build momentum. So I grab onto him and get lost. And then I get myself back on track.
Yeah. And you and I are both very similar. And I'm sure that a lot of people watching have interacted with you directly. And both of us, whether we're having a good day or a bad day, are the same person. And I know that your clients have pointed out to you and my clients have pointed that out to me. And we've pointed out to each other. You could come in here tomorrow and be having the worst day of your life and you would not show it. And I pride myself too on being like that. And that's the same thing as you're saying about getting rid of it. Like I said earlier, the sun is still going to come up tomorrow, regardless of the decisions that I make today. And if I choose to be miserable today because I'm dealing with some shit, I am only making it worse.
Yeah.
There's no point just being stuck on feeling like shit. Like you can deal with things differently. If you're having a shit day, just get rid of it and move on. And you don't have to dwell. It only makes it worse.
That's it.
So being in that kind of mindset and having that headspace and being that kind of person is contagious too. So even if that's the only thing that people take away from the video today is that you're in control of your path, then that's a huge win.
That's it, 100%. So thanks a lot, Sam, for sharing. We'll summarize it and kind of wrap it up here for today. But you know, you're in control of you, and the only way to be the better version of yourself is by taking action. All right. So you can talk and read all the books that you want, but you have to take a step. So thanks a lot, Sam. Appreciate it. Thanks, guys, for tuning in. Again, as always, comments in the comments box. Any questions that you want for Sam or myself, we'll keep these going. So we're gonna try to keep it going every Friday. Frequently asked questions, and that's what we have for today. Thanks, guys. Thanks for tuning in. We'll talk to you soon.
Take
Thanks,
care.
Sam. Cheers.